There's been a huge focus lately, as there should be, on mental health, mental well-being. And if these past few months have taught us anything, is that maybe we take life a little bit too fast. Maybe this frantic pace that we all live in just needs to be, I don't know, dialed back a little bit. After all, being first doesn't necessarily mean you have to be fast. Media that's downloaded at just the click of a button, online shopping that's just a click away. Do we really need all that? Maybe we do need a change of tack. Maybe we need to just slow things down a little bit and, I don't know, relax a little bit more. Focus on other things. Focus on mindfulness. And that change of pace is probably no more evident than it is with the Mercedes-Benz EQ range, their electrified range of cars. They're not the fastest Mercedes out there, not even the fastest EVs. But that's a good thing, isn't it? Welcome to this week's road test of the Mercedes-Benz EQA, and welcome to AutoEV. Now, before we go on to this week's video of the new EQA, it is of course that time where I ask you to like the videos, subscribe to the channel and press the little bell button you'll see just down below there so you receive notification of when our next video goes live. The EQA, it's based on Mercedes' GLA, their smallest of their SUVs, and it is a electric version of a combustion engine car, and it competes with the Ford Mustang Mach-E and the Audi Q4 e-tron that we tested in our last video. This was the sort of the third cog in that wheel, as I alluded to back then. But the fact that it is a sort of converted combustion engine car, does that make it compromised? Does that make it any less of an EV than those other two which were designed as EVs from the ground up? Well, that's what we're going to find out. Styling wise, well, it's restrained and conservative, which is thankfully more Mercedes-Benz tack these days, which I have to say I sort of quite like. Some might call it plain, some might call it dull. I'm going to stick with restrained. You get obviously there's no grille here because that's just filled in with this kind of black face, and depending on the trim level you get will depend whether or not there's chrome strips in there. This is the lead-in sport model. The AMG line cars get a couple of chrome strips in there, but you've got the nice big bold three-pointed star there and the one embedded into the bonnet. You've got these lovely LED headlights, and which are standard right across the range as well. There's a light bar which joins the two headlights when the lights are on, which is quite nice, very reminiscent of the larger EQC model. Down the bottom, a little grille in there, just a little bit of airflow into the batteries and motor. These little bit of plastic infills here, they're not really fake vents, although maybe some people do think that, but that's what it's lacking. It's lacking the Audi's sort of like fussiness, which, although I think the Audi's a great looking car, this is just a little bit more elegant. And round the same, that sort of continues. Again, some people might say it's a bit dull or a little bit, I don't know, plain Jane, but I happen to quite like it. I think there's something quite, just as I say, there's something unfussy about it. There's something just nice about the car. It doesn't stand out. You get the EQA badging up here as is normal. The wheels on the car, these are the 18-inch alloy wheels, and they're different to the GLA style. They're a bit more aero efficient, obviously being the electric one, and you also get this chrome flash through the sill there on the EQ model, where you don't on the normal GLA. But yeah, it's restrained and it's a handsome thing. It's not going to set your pulse racing, but yeah, it's quite a handsome looking thing. And at the back, well, it's the same story really. Of course, you've got your light bar across the back that just seems to be a, I don't know, it seems to be a tick box on every electric SUV that we see at the moment. It's quite nice. They've had to move the three-pointed star down from there into here because of that, but this also doubles up as a boot lid release, and also the rear view camera when you engage reverse, which actually is quite noisy when it activates. You can really hear it come out. Anyway, by the by, you've got some nice kind of badging and the kind of chrome type trim here and along the bottom. Look, it's not as exciting as the Mustang, and it's not as stylish, dare I say, as the Audi Q4 e-tron. I think in terms of the three cars that we're sort of like really looking at, the Mercedes, the Audi and the Ford, I think the Mercedes does come in last. But as I say, I think it's quite, yeah, I think it's just quite restrained. I think it's very Mercedes-like. But let us know what you think. What do you think? Is it too plain? Does it need a bit more excitement? Or is it just right? Let us know what you think in the comments. Now I have to say, things don't get off to a particularly good start for the EQA in terms of boot space. The boot itself is just 340 litres, which is way down on where the Audi Q4 e-tron was, significantly less than the Ford Mustang Mach-E, and even smaller than the Lexus UX300E, which was one of the things we really criticised that car for. Now you can split fold the rear seats, it's called like a 40-40-20 split, and that will take up to 1,320 litres. But oddly, in terms of the actual space, it is a little bit more usable than the Lexus, as we'll see in a second. But the first problem we have is where this is an internal combustion engine car that's then re-engineered to be an electric car, is there is no underfloor storage for cables because batteries are underneath there. And it's a much smaller boot than you get in the petrol or diesel GLA. There's no underfloor but here for your batteries, for your cables, so therefore they're left in these bags, which you're going to have to find a home for. Anyway, but let me show you what I was talking about with space, our suitcases. We can only get two in the Lexus, but here's our large case. There's a medium case there, and we can get our cabin bag in there. So they do actually fit, and the boot closes. Now obviously if you were using maybe more cabin bags, you could get more of them in there, or you know, sort of like different size suitcases, it would be different. So it does kind of fit, and there's a bit of space on the top, you know, for a rucksack or something. So it's not too bad in that sense, but it is much smaller than the Audi and the Ford. Now this car is also optioned up with a retractable tow bar, which comes out from the bottom here, like the Volvo does, the XC40. There you go, very handy. It also comes with a trailer stabilisation system as well. Not that I'm suggesting you're going to need that option if you've got a lot of suitcases, but well, you know, it's always handy. And then we get on to a second issue with the car, where its batteries are. Now the space back here is actually okay in terms of legroom and headroom, but of course, as I said, the batteries are having to be sort of like packaged underneath the car and in the boot, which means they're sort of underneath the floor. So if I sit straight, my knees are kind of pushed up. Now I'm not particularly tall, as you know, so I think anybody that was sort of like 6 foot or above, this would be a really uncomfortable way for them to sit. So you do find your legs being pushed up quite a bit. That being said, as I say, there's plenty of legroom. As I say, I've got plenty of headroom, and there's foot space underneath the front seats. And the seat itself is okay, it's quite comfortable in fairness. So for children, it's going to be absolutely fine. Although what I will say is, my 7-year-old was sitting in this seat the other day and she can put her feet on the floor. Now I'm not sure whether I have a really tall 7-year-old, also takes after her mother, or whether or not that means the floor is a little bit too high, but there you go. The rest of it, as I say, is not bad. You've got map pockets back here for a bit of storage. There's door bins that will take a water bottle. They're not vast, but they will take it. There's a little tray in here for something. There's a USB-C charging port there for iPads or something. You can also got a nice fold down armrest. It's got these little flip out cup holders, which is quite nice. Good adjustable head restraints, and as I say, you can fold this centre section down if you had particularly long loads or needed to get through. So it's not all bad news back here, but it is another Achilles heel with the car. Now don't turn off just yet, because this is where things start to get a whole lot better. Much like the outside, the interior is as you'd expect from Mercedes, which is to say, fabulous. Of the three cars, the Ford Mustang Mach-E, the Audi Q4 e-tron and the Mercedes EQA, it's the Mercedes, I have to say, has got the best interior of the three. It seems to just blend that sort of style, quality and enough tech where it's not overwhelming like it is in the Mustang, but it's a little bit more up to date and modern than it felt in the Audi. And also the build quality is probably the best of the three as well. It's probably just ahead of the Audi, not far ahead of it, but probably just a little bit ahead of it. Now, the dashboard is dominated by this big display and it works really, really well. It looks like one big screen, but it's actually two 10-inch displays. One in front of the driver where you can have your instrumentation there, or you can configure it depending how you want. So you can have less prominent dials or sportier looking dials, and you can have maybe a smaller scale map in there, or you could have your media in there, or your trip information in there. And then this infotainment screen here, which again you can configure whether you want your navigation, your media outlet, trip computer charging information, telephone and so forth. Now it's controlled three ways. There's a trackpad in here which is really nice and easy to use, a lot better than the Lexus's kind of awkward one, because it just works with a swipe and you get this nice haptic feedback from it as you click it as well. You can also use the screen itself, so you can just swipe through as a touch screen, or you can actually use voice activation. So if we were to go, "Hey Mercedes,
how may I help you?
Navigate me to Staines-upon-Thames."
Starting route guidance to Staines-upon-Thames.
For a second there I thought it wasn't going to work this time. There you go. So nice and easy to use. I would say it probably trails the Volvo XC40 Recharge with its Google Assistant for me in terms of that, but it's very good nonetheless. I've been using this car for a week now and it does work really, really well. The dashboard design itself is wonderful. As I say, the quality is superb. Everything's really solid. This, believe it or not, is the lead-in sport model, and this is all standard. What you see here, there's no options on this car save for the metallic paint, the retractable tow bar, and some extra a driver assistance package, which just increases what the driver assistant functions do. So that's it. This is what you get in the the basic model EQA250 Sport, and it looks wonderful. You've got this article man-made leather. I mean, like Mercedes used to call it MB Tex years ago in my days, but it's lovely. It works really, really well. You've got a Napa leather steering wheel here. You've got these lovely kind of turbine vents, which, like the Audis, they've just got that nice click to them as you turn them. Physical heating and ventilation controls down here, which are all nice and easy to use. I've got relatively good storage. I've got a slidey bit here where I've got a bit for my mobile phone. It also comes with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, although not wireless. It's not wireless like the other two cars, where you also don't get the wireless mobile charging on this model. You've got to move up to a higher grade before you get it. And that's the only thing I would say. Again, we'll talk about trims later on, but there's not a lot of options you can add in. You've got to move up to the next grade before you get certain things, and that's a little bit disappointing. But to be honest with you, if the lack of a wireless charging pad from a mobile and a panoramic sunroof is all that I would want for in this car, I don't think I'd bemoan that, to be honest with you. The rest of it's lovely. It really works. I've got cup holders in here. I've got this little centre armrest in here that's quite nice and deep. It's got USB charging there. We've got USB charging here. Door bins, you know, they're nice. They're lined with rubber at the bottom so things don't move around. The steering wheel as well. It's got a nice, it feels much more comfortable than the Audis did. You've got typical Mercedes-Benz. You've got the one column stalk here that activates wipers and lights, and this column stalk over here is actually a transmission lever. I've got physical controls for the lights down by my right knee here. It's just clean, well laid out and built beautifully well. I have to say, yeah, this is the best interior of the three for me. The seats, in this car, they're sort of somewhere between the Audis and the Mustang. They're much more supportive, certainly laterally, than the Mustangs were. Not quite as good as the Audis. They've got a good range of adjustment as well. So I've got the extendable squab here as well, which I quite like for my under knee support. They're manually adjustable in this car, but again, obviously, as you move up through the trims, you can obviously go into electric. But they are heated, in fairness. They're heated in this car. And the controls themselves down here, they're nice and easy to use. So as well as the trackpad, there's just enough physical buttons to allow you to go to shortcuts, so you don't have to keep going into the screen. So if you want, for instance, your radio and media up, there's a shortcut button which just brings it straight up. If you want you know, the parking camera up, you know, there's a button there for it. If you want to go back to navigation, you just press the button. You don't have to go into the screen to get through there. And the controls on the steering wheel, there's a couple of little kind of touch sensitive ones here, but again, they give you that little haptic feedback as you scroll through it, and then you physically click them to select something. But the rest, in terms of the volume and setting the cruise control, it's all physical buttons, so it all works really well. I love this interior. I think it's a real triumph. Yeah, my favourite. In fact, the only car I would say that comes close, probably beats it a little bit for me, is that Volvo XC40. Other than that, yep, Audi, take note. This is how you do tech in an interior. Now, the EQA only comes in one battery size, which is to say 66 kilowatt hour usable battery size. Now that's a little bit smaller than the Mustang Mach-E and the Audi Q4 e-tron that we had on test, but bear in mind both of those models were their higher capacity battery versions. They are available with a more comparable smaller battery to the Mercedes, but the Mercedes only gets that one option at 66 kilowatt hours. Now that should give, according to WLTP figures, a range of about 263 miles, which is probably going to relate to about 240 to 250 in normal summer months, maybe in winter closer to 200, so a little bit down. It will take speeds, charging speeds, up to 100 kilowatts, which means you can go from 10% to 80% in 30 minutes, which is about right for this type of car. But where it's slightly different is it has an onboard 11 kilowatt charger. So in other words, if your house has that three-phase electrical supply and you can use an 11 kilowatt wall box, you can top the car up to full in 5 hours 45 minutes. If it's a more likely 7 kilowatt battery charger that you have, wall box, sorry, you have, then it's probably going to take nearer to 11 hours, so overnight, as you would probably find. The other difference with the Mercedes, however, is it has a heat pump as standard, whereas it's an option in the Audi and not available at all on the Ford. So it is a little bit more efficient because of that. Now on the road, the Mercedes sort of splits the Audi and the Ford. And surprisingly, it feels a little bit more composed. Now it's front wheel drive, the motor is mounted up at the front, whereas the other two were rear wheel drive. Now, before I conducted these road tests, I was very, very fortunate enough to be invited to a media day where we were allowed to drive a variety of cars in a closed environment. Now it was actually Millbrook Proving Ground, which is, they have a thing there called the Alpine route, or the hill route, which is where the Casino Royale car chase was filmed. If you're a bit of a Bond fan, sorry to ruin that for you. If you are a Bond fan, it was filmed in Bedfordshire, not Montenegro. There you go. So anyway, the whole point of that story is, over that quite twisting and demanding route, I actually found the front wheel drive Mercedes a little bit better. Now you'd think a rear wheel drive car, you're an enthusiast, that's what you want. But of course, what then happens, because they've got the motors mounted at the rear, the weight distribution is slightly different because you don't have the engine up at the front. So what was happening was the Audi was washing out at the front, whereas the Mercedes was digging in a bit more. It had a little bit more grip, and that is the case here. Now it's not a car you're going to throw around, don't get me wrong, it's not sports, but I mean, again, the trim level sport, don't be misled by that. As far as I'm concerned, they should have called it SE or Lux, because that's what it feels like. It's not a sporty drive in the terms of you want to just grab the keys and go out along a twisty road, but it is better than the Q4. Now, there's 3 power ratings available with the EQA. There's the 250 that we've got, which is 190 brake horsepower. The reason they call it 250 is to bring it in line with the GLA. It's something to do with the size of its engine or something to make you realise that that's the equivalent of the GLA 250. Anyway, so it's 190 brake horsepower, so that's on a par with the Audi Q4 e-tron that we had, which was 201 brake horsepower. So its 0 to 60 dash is, well, it's a whisker under 9 seconds, and its irrelevant top speed is 99 miles an hour if you're interested. But you can go up then to the EQA 300, which is 228 brake horsepower, and then the EQA 350, which is 292 brake horsepower. So you do have, you know, you do have more kind of performance available to you if you go up the EQ range. And both of those other cars are also 4MATICs, which means that they're dual motors, they're all-wheel drive. So again, you've got the equivalent to the Audi and the Ford in the Mercedes range, if that's what you want. But I have to say, I think this could be the jewel in the crown. I like the way the 250 performs. It's just nice. It's not trying to be something that it clearly can't be, and I think it's all the better for it. There's a smoothness, a slickness to this car that I'm not saying was missing in the other two, but maybe just wasn't as evident as it is in the Mercedes. There's a refinement, a solidity, as I say, a slickness to it that just makes it a really pleasant car to drive. Now, suspension wise, thank the Lord, somebody's realised despite calling it sport, they've actually fitted it as standard with comfort suspension, and along with those 18-inch wheels, the ride quality is really good. Now, I said that the Q4 had a really good ride quality, but you noticed the suspension noise a lot more. This goes one stage further, that dampens a lot of that noise out, so this feels like a smoother car because you don't get that suspension noise. So the ride comfort is as good as the Audis, and there's less noise, so the whole thing feels a bit more isolated from the road, and that's a good thing. You have a really nice steering feel. It's not as light as the Mustangs. There's again a kind of weight behind it which makes it feel like it's a really well engineered car. The throttle response is really good. There's a nice weighting to the pedals, and importantly to the brake pedal, which is really very good. When you go onto the brakes, it's a really beautifully progressive pedal. Now, you can adjust the regeneration in the Mercedes like you can with the other two as well, and like the Hyundais and Kias, it's done via these two paddles up on the steering column. So if you want to get aggressive, you can get very aggressive, so that is literally one pedal driving. If you want, you literally lift off and the thing will pull up to a standstill. That's really very, very impressive. But what's more impressive is that the car uses its radar guided cruise control to actually activate the brake regeneration even if it's not on. So if there's a car in front of me at the moment, so if I was going up to it and I was going a little bit too fast, even without the cruise control on, the car will actually activate brake regeneration to slow me up in a really controlled manner and activate the regeneration on the brakes. That's really impressive. There's a huge amount of safety has gone into this car, as you always find with Mercedes-Benz. There's a plethora of airbags. There is your usual driver assistance that you get, you know, lane keep assist, blind spot monitoring, radar guided cruise control. But there is a further option which is fitted to this particular model that I have, of a driver assistance package, which takes those up a notch or two, brings them into even more levels of safety and even more bits and pieces that you might not normally get. So yeah, there's a focus on safety in the car, and that's good. The rest of it just feels excellent. I really, really like the way this car drives. there's a nice balance to the chassis, there's a nice level of grip. As I say, it's front wheel drive, there's a level of grip at the front. The car just seems to dig in. It doesn't feel like it's ever going to get out of shape, but it doesn't feel like a car that just wants to be hurried. And that's what I like about it. I like the fact that it is tuned more for that luxury and comfort. It's a bit like the Lexus in that sense. The refinement is obviously its main criteria, and you can tell it's just a beautifully smooth car to drive. Now, there are different driving modes. You can get a little bit sporty if you want. There's different drive modes down here. There's a little wheel here called dynamic, a little toggle switch, and if I press that, then I have the choice of either comfort, sport, eco, or individual. So comfort's the kind of baseline, as I say. That's where you get, you know, sort of like everything's just nicely set up and there's nothing too scary about it. If you want to get a little bit, well, sporty, you go into sport and oh yeah, I tell you what, the throttle response in sport is a lot quicker than it is in the Audi. You jump on that throttle and it's very easy to spin up the front tyres when you're coming out of a junction, just like that. Yeah, you can really feel there's a lot sharper throttle when you're in the sport mode. But comfort, I think, is just where the car feels really, really nice. I like it, I really do. The seats are comfortable. They are, I mentioned before, there's a reasonable amount of lateral support. They're not quite as sporty feeling as the Audis. I mean, they held you really well. I have to give credit to the Audi for that. They held you really well. But they're not as soft as the Fords, but they're just the right level of support, and I feel just right. The driving position's really nice. The pedals are in a nice place. The wheel's straight ahead. The wheel itself, the steering wheel's a lot more comfortable to hold than that silly squared off one that the Audi had. And the visibility is excellent. My over the shoulder visibility out the back, there's a slightly thicker rear pillar, but you've got really big mirrors out the side, and you've got your blind spot assist monitoring as well. This is a lovely car, really, really nice for a car that wasn't designed as an electric car from the ground up. This is, I think, as good as you'd ever want an EV to be. Now, the Audi Q4 e-tron Sport that we tested in the last video was just over £52,500. The Mustang Mach-E extended range that we had, rear wheel drive, was £51,000. Now, this is a Mercedes-Benz. Want to guess how much this is? £47,500 with the options fitted to this car. That's really good value for money. Okay, the Audi and the Ford had the bigger batteries, so if you plumped for the smaller battery versions, they would be less. But the range starts at just £44,500 for the Sport model. Now you move up into AMG line and AMG line Premium, and that's either a £1,500 or a £3,000 option respectively. You also, although it's a single battery variant that's only available in the EQA, you do get higher power ratings, so you can have an EQA 300 and an EQA 350. Now that goes from about £48,000 up to about £53,000 on those two. But not only are you getting more power, but you're also getting twin motors with those, so all-wheel drive. So that's still really competitive with the other two cars that we had, and really competitive if you factor in the Lexus UX300E. When was the last time we said a Mercedes-Benz offered value for money? Wow. Well, here's something you don't normally get with one of these videos, an apology. It's an apology to some of our American viewers, as well as some of our European and UK people who have mentioned that there is one car, one really important car, that I keep forgetting to mention when we talk about competition in this sector of the market. And that's the Tesla Model Y. Of course, it's coming. We don't have it here in the UK yet, but it is coming, and therefore is going to be a force to be reckoned with. So there you are, Tesla Model Y. But of course, up until now, the cars I've been talking about were the ones we've been testing, which was the Audi Q4 e-tron and the Ford Mustang Mach-E. You've also got to consider, although its talents aren't as good and it's not as polished as these cars, the Lexus UX300E, it is a very comfortable and very refined car, if a little bit expensive and very down on range. There's the other MEB platform cars that don't wear an Audi badge, the Volkswagen ID4, its upcoming ID5, Skoda's Enyaq, which as you know we're a massive fan of in this channel, and then of course from the Koreans we've got the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and Kia EV6. But don't forget one of our other favourites that's coming as well with smaller batteries and therefore a lower price, Volvo XC40 Recharge. So the old EQA's got its work cut out for it. So here's what we like and what we don't like about the Mercedes-Benz EQA250. We like its refinement, its standard equipment, its price, the build quality, and its interior design. We don't like the boot capacity is quite small. There's a lack of rear seat space. The styling is a little bit reserved. Its overall range lags its main rivals, and there's a lack of battery options throughout the range. So is the Mercedes-Benz EQA250 a better car than the Audi Q4 e-tron and Ford Mustang Mach-E? Well, I think it has a better interior, both in terms of its comfort, refinement, tech on offer, and build quality. I mean, it's miles ahead of the Ford there, and it's actually, believe it or not, slightly ahead of the Audi in that basis too. But then the Audi and Ford counter by being more practical. The Audi's a little bit more stylish, dare I say, and the Ford's a little bit more dynamic. But then the Mercedes counters with its value for money argument, which you've never really been able to say about a Mercedes-Benz before. So how do we pick a winner? How do we narrow it down to choosing one car between the three? Well, I spent a bit of time with this car, and the more time I spend with it, the more I drive it, the more I really, really like it. I think, although it's not a ground-up EV like the other two, and it is compromised because of that, despite that, it actually offers a better balance of attributes than the other two. There's something about it that's really got under my skin and has really won me over with this car. My head still says Audi, my heart still says Ford Mustang Mach-E, but my wallet and my mindfulness says Mercedes-Benz. Thank you as always for watching. Please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and please do leave a comment down below for us. And if you haven't been there, please remember to head over to autoev.co.uk, where you'll find our back catalogue of library reviews waiting for you, along with all the latest news from the EV world. Thanks again, we'll see you soon. So, you've watched our video. It's now my job to tell you to like and subscribe, and press the little bell button to receive notification of when our next video is uploaded.